what held me there is that you are seeing people who are in despair and who are suffering, whose lives are being changed by what you're sharing with them.
Oh, wow. Okay. Hello and welcome to We're Talking About Rabbits. That's this podcast brought to you by First Things Foundation. This podcast is where we dig into things theological, historical, psychological, philosophical, and today we do it as a part of our Immersion Series. That's right. That's this series where we look at things deeply immersed, usually human beings who jump into the deep end, get turned upside down, and somehow are better for it. Navy SEALs, First Things Foundation field workers, test pilots, reggae artists, and lots of other people, including today, we talked to Jeremy Firth. Jeremy Firth was a Mormon missionary. He no longer is a Mormon. You'll hear his story. He's going to talk to you about what it was like to knock on doors and have people tell you all day long, go away, on the Immersion Series, WAWTAR. Jeremy Firth, how are you? Welcome, man. Thanks for calling on.
I'm great, thanks. I'm excited to be here. A little nervous, but I love your show, so I'm excited to be able to talk to you.
No, so it's really good to have you on. You came through after hearing some podcasts and getting involved. You're a guy who's understanding this old world, new world, because for today, one of the things we want to get into is this concept of immersing within a faith as a missionary, and the faith was Mormonism.
Yes.
And since that time, what I'm really fascinated with, what I'm really happy to have you here, is since that time, you also have a perspective of becoming an Orthodox convert. And so there's a lot to be taking apart in terms of our series on to immerse, because you're immersing now, as we know, about this other thing, orthodoxy. But tell us about growing up and then how you went on this Mormon mission and what it meant to you as you were going in that direction.
Well, we weren't religious at all, when I was really young. And then my parents got divorced when I was 10. And then my mom kind of went through a renewal where she wanted to be faithful. Like she grew up Mormon.
Okay. So
she wanted to be faithful. So she met a guy who also wanted to be faithful Mormon, and they wanted to kind of start a new life together. They got married when I was 11, and I went to live with my mom at that time. Like I was living with my dad, and then they got married, so I went to live with my mom. And she started going to church, and we're like in Mormonism, they baptize anyone who's 8 or older. So they don't have infant baptism, but you have to be 8 years old. Well, I was 11, so I was like, oh, do you want to be Mormon? And I was like, okay, I don't know. Like I'd been to a Baptist church a few times with my stepmom and stuff, but I really didn't have a framework. But so the missionaries started coming over and teaching us when I was a kid,
Where were you growing up?
Evanston, Wyoming at the time.
And that mission, the Mormon missionaries came there. That's interesting.
Yeah. Oh, they're basically everywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, there's, if you're in Antarctica, you might have a hard time, they won't knock on your door there, but pretty much everywhere, maybe not China, but pretty much everywhere else, they're going to be there. No, not Iran, but anyway.
But so your mother knew about them.
Yeah. She was Mormon.
Right.
Like she grew up Mormon, so she knew all about it. So she just wanted to know if we wanted to join. And I was kind of like ambivalent about it until it got to at the time it was called the fourth discussion, which is they were talking about it's more than their eschatology, but it's basically their eschatology. Mm-hmm. So where we came from, so they believe that they believe in the what's the Pelagianism, where we were spirits before, and then we came in
like second
to this life. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then after this life, we're like, okay, so then there's spirit prison, spirit hell, but that's just a temporary place until final judgment. And then at final judgment, there's the three kingdoms in the kingdom of God. And, the top kingdom is for the people who have been faithful and been baptized in the Mormon church. And that's where you get to be together with your family forever. And like that thing, like because of the chaos of having gone through a divorce, like the idea that I could be with my family forever was really like,
and this was
appealing.
These were 8-year-old ideas that you were downloading. And this is when you were 8 or 9 learning this.
I was 11. Yeah. But yeah, I was 11 at the time. And I was like, yeah, okay, of course I want to do that. So I got baptized and I became very active. Like I started reading the scriptures right from the beginning. I was reading, we would read together as a family every day. And then, I was involved heavily all
what
through.
What do those
like,
scriptures look like? They're the same. They're canonical scriptures as per orthodoxy? No, they're different.
No. So they use the King James Version of the Bible, and then they use the Book of Mormon. They have the Doctrine and Covenants, which was a collection of basically revelations and letters that were written by primarily Joseph Smith while he was alive. And then they have another book called The Pearl of Great Price, which is very interesting. They have 7 chapters. It's called the 7 chapters of Moses that are basically like intended to be a replacement for the first 5 chapters of Genesis. And they have another 3 chapters of what's called the Book of Abraham that he said he found that was written by Abraham about the life of Abraham.
Yeah.
So, but that's kind of we're getting kind of off in the details. Sorry.
No, it's interesting. But
anyway.
So these are the things you're learning, you're moving forward, and you're heading toward this mission, which everybody knows about this. And I think anybody who's even an American who barely knows what Mormonism is probably knows what a Mormon missionary is. And that's something you saw coming in your future that you thought, yeah, man, this is going to be good.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's a lot of cultural pressure, especially at that time where like every young man was expected to serve a mission. Right. Yeah. And they teach all the girls only marry a returned missionary. So that's
the proper way to put pressure.
Right. No premarital sex.
That will work.
All men serve, girls only marry men who serve. And it worked on me. So I mean, all through high school, we had religious training where they call it seminary here, where, it's like we took the Old Testament one year, the New Testament the next year, the Book of Mormon one year, and then the Doctrine and Covenants and Pearl of Great Price the 4th year. So each year in high school, we studied the scriptures, and it was a daily class of like an hour of religious instruction in the scriptures. So I was deeply embedded in that, and was active in church. I loved it. It gave me a lot of structure. I avoided a lot of the pitfalls of high school. I didn't have any addictions. I didn't have any. Oh, that was my daughter. Sorry.
Yeah, that's awesome.
But
that's
right. she was trying to be spry.
Awesome.
But anyway, I avoided a lot of the pitfalls, and was taught like the basics of asceticism. Daily scripture study and prayer, and
so what? Good. All right, so go to the missionary part, because what I'm trying to figure out in part. So this was helpful because we all walked through this context with you. Because what we're going to do is dive. I want to hear about the dive. The dive is something like getting on the plane, right? In terms of this series, this sub-series of ours, there's something, I know there's a moment coming up because we talked a little bit about it. There's a moment when you get underwater from this long jump in and you're a little upside down. Do you remember when that moment came for you in terms of being a Mormon missionary? Was there something about the process where you said, yeah, right now I am not comfortable?
Yeah, for sure. I honestly got through the first 3 months of my mission on pure adrenaline. I mean, just like, you don't know what's going on. You're upside down and confused, right? So the first month you go to a training center in Provo, Utah, and they teach you the method that they use for teaching people and for tracking who you've talked to and how to schedule appointments and lessons. You're learning the lessons that they use. There were 6 discussions at the time, and you're memorizing those, and you're learning basically the framework that they want you to use to teach the gospel. And then you get put in a plane. Well, I got to see my family one more time at the end of that. So this is probably like difficulty number one. The only way I had of contacting my family was via letter.
Yeah.
No phone calls.
Yeah.
So we do a phone call on Mother's Day and we could do a phone call on Christmas, right? So I left in September. So I went into mission and then I went out to Canada at the end of September. So I served in Toronto, Canada. And Toronto is a very cosmopolitan city. There's, I met people from over 110 countries because I started keeping track, right? So I met a lot of people. But so one, I was going from rural to urban. Two, you're on a mission. There's all these different rules. I was living with somebody else. You're with someone else 24/7, and you don't get to pick who that person is.
Right.
You have a companion. You're living with them. You're living together. You're eating together. You're studying scriptures together.
And you don't pick them. Bunking, like you're not in a separate
same room.
Yeah.
Nope. Yeah. Missionaries are to sleep in the same room, but not the same bed. That's like that's a rule right out of the handbook that we used to.
Not same bed. Yeah.
Right.
And you remember this well, because this was different.
Yeah, well, yeah, no, it was really hard. And it was okay. And then my first companion and I got along really well. And then my second companion and I did not get along well at all. And it went from okay to, and this is at about November or December. So we're just heading into Christmas. I'm getting super homesick. And I'm with a guy I can't stand. And I mean, I literally remember standing on the subway platform, like contemplating shoving him into the subway. Like it was dark.
Yeah, he's not your favorite person at that point.
No, no.
What are the lessons that you're learning about your Mormonism that you're breaking at this point? Because aren't you supposed to be meeting people with sort of fashioned as joyous Christian Mormons, and then you're wanting to like kill your roommate? Was there some tension within you about what you were doing? Was it difficult to figure out why this was happening to you that way? This tension?
Yes, definitely. Well, there's always a feeling like there's a big problem that Mormon missionaries have, and it is taking things way too personally as far as like how the work's going, right? So at that time, we're not like, people are just evading us, or they'll make an appointment and then they would just skip the appointment. They wouldn't be there.
Yes.
And so you're constantly dealing with that. And there's the constant rejection because we went door to door. So you've got all day is filled with rejection. It's cold and miserable outside. And then people who do say they're interested are no longer interested. And you go home and want to kill your companion, right? So you can't get through, and you're out 12 hours a day, right? We woke up at 6:30. We went out the door by 9:30, and we stayed out until 9:00 at night.
Did you have bicycles?
No, we had bus passes because we were
in the city. Yeah.
Yeah, we were in the city, so we had bus passes. And there's no, like, I was living on $200 a month Canadian. Our rent was paid, but I was living on $200 a month Canadian, and that pays for food and laundry and clothes and everything you need.
So was there a public face you had to keep up? What was happening inside in terms of the story you were telling yourself versus the experience you were actually having? Was there...
it was less difficult at that time because we weren't teaching a lot.
You're just getting rejections.
Other mission, right? We're just getting rejections. So I'm already kind of down, but I'm kind of a naturally optimistic person anyway. So it wasn't like I didn't really take it personally that we weren't teaching a lot of people. I just was looking forward to how long do I have to be with this guy? Because basically, like every 2 to 3 months, they would rotate you either to a new area or they would rotate someone into your area. So usually, like, they rarely moved both of you at the same time. Usually you had you had boundaries that you were working within, and they would one person would be there and you would move in and you would work with them for a couple of months, and then they would move them out and someone else would move in with you. So it was rotating that way. Mm-hmm. So I was basically just trying to grind it out, but I was very depressed. And that, I will say, Mormonism really didn't provide a lot of tools for dealing with that. Like the prayer that I've learned since being Orthodox, like learning how to pray as an Orthodox Christian is very different. Like Mormon prayer was very much just like asking for what you wanted. Or at least I mean, there was a lot of gratitude, I mean, they definitely emphasized gratitude. Don't get me wrong, but it was all personal. It was all like whatever comes in your head, like whatever you're saying. It was more conversational. Right. It wasn't as meditational, for lack of a better word. It wasn't as contemplative, wasn't as deep, right? It was all in the head, right? There's no in the heart.
Were you learning that prayer? So one of the interesting things I learned upon conversion, or really it was within the long journey that I'm still on, was that prayer isn't for God, it's for you.
Right.
And that's that it's supposed to change, metanoia, right? The idea that we're doing it's like asking God for something. It's just odd. It's already known. And so it's almost like a basketball practice. It's not, basketball practice is really for you so you can be prepared for the actual game.
Yes.
And that's why the suffering is so profound, because it feels like I just want the game, but you have to go through this thing. And that wasn't the notion of prayer in the Mormon world.
No, they were kind of separate. I would say it's almost like their religion is kind of psychologized a lot, and it's very separated, right? So I'm trying to. It's hard to put into words, but like comparing it to my experience in orthodoxy, Mormonism is very much in the head and very anxious. And I went through the very destructive cycle of extreme anxiety, despair, confession, elation, and I'm not using the right direction, but despair and then confession and then elation and then pride and then despair.
Wow.
And that is like the cycle of my mission, right? Like that cycle just played out in very deep ways. So like it went again, like after I got away from that companion, I kind of had some relief, and I had some companions I got along with and got moved out into because the area we were in as well was very foreign to me. Like I grew up in Utah, okay, largely. And when I got onto a bus, like it was the first time in my life I had not been the majority. Like I got on a bus and my companion and I were the only two white guys on the bus.
Right.
And I was like it was just very out of my element. And like everybody around me, they were all from Sri Lanka and India and Africa. And I had never met anybody like that. I didn't know anybody. And you go to shake hands and they don't know what to do and you don't know what to do. And like, it's just, we were right at the edge of old world, new world. And they had come from the old world. So they're trying to assimilate.
Right.
And we're bringing the new world to Canada, in
so
our
stop right there.
American imperialism way.
In retrospect, with context, you could see, you felt the Mormonism was the new world in terms of that mission that you were on. Were you trying to uphold sort of a new world in terms of the way we talk about on the show? Like when you would meet somebody from Sri Lanka, looking back now, right now, do you think of yourself as sharing a new world ideology as a Mormon?
Yes.
That's what that is.
Yes.
What makes it that way in your mind? Where did they lose?
Well,
most quote religions are tied somehow back to. I agree with you on Mormonism as a new world phenomenon, but why would you say that? I wonder.
Well, so they have symbolism, and they have a rich, I would say this: they have a rich library of symbols, but no theology, or their theology doesn't really tie it together very well. They have kind of a superficial understanding of their symbolism because they don't talk explicitly about it, largely because they're told don't talk about anything in the temple. So they just kind of like blanket over everything, which I understand, like from a sacred point of view and a holy point of view. I completely understand that, but it's at the expense of understanding what it is that they're like, even because there is a participatory notion of what happens in the temple, right? Like you're physically doing it. But the thing, like you're going through and they're presenting things, and then you're changing your robes, and there's a bodily aspect to it. Yeah, it's a ritual for sure. But the idea is that like most of their religion is very propositional. It's not experiential. And then when they do say, oh, you do feel the Spirit, it's emotionalism, right? So it's like this, oh, you feel this, it's like hot in the room and everyone feels some pressure in there, and one person might be crying, and if you're crying, that's the Spirit.
And everybody picks up on that spirit of crying. Spirit of sadness.
Yeah. So the New World aspect too is just like, I mean, America, like looking back now too, Mormonism is deeply Protestant. And even though they claim to be recovering like the original church, all of their notions are still deep Protestant. There's no imagery in the chapel. They don't believe in the real presence. They, like it's very Protestant. And I think, and then, being from Utah, we kind of have this distinct culture within America. Like Utah is what America was 50 years ago, always. Mm-hmm. So we are that, but we are American for sure, which is still a very new world. So we have respect for tradition. People here still celebrate, like people go out and put their lawn chairs on the street the night before the 4th of July parade to hold their spot. And the families are all out there and they're throwing the candy and there's the parade and the floats. So they're still deeply involved civically and they still believe in the traditions, but they also fall prey to the spirit of the times a lot more than orthodoxy. I mean, the spirit of the times is what eats the Mormon church.
And that's happening now, you think?
Oh, yeah. Well, just in my lifetime, they went from being adamantly against shopping on Sunday or going to restaurants on Sunday because you were compelling someone else to break the Sabbath. Like they were like, keep the Sabbath day holy, right? Now they own a shopping center, a multi-billion-dollar shopping center that's open on Sundays. And that's happened in my lifetime. So that's a big shift.
Yeah, we might return to that in a second.
That's fine. I'm sorry. I keep kind of wandering off.
No, I like that.
Okay.
Because I think most people in this audience and just in general, when they hear about Mormonism, would think that they're fighting the tide because, there's this old notion that the Mormons have many wives and they're old fashioned.
No, they don't. Yeah. Right. No, they don't have, they haven't done polygamy since the late 1800s.
This is all dumb stuff. Right. But it's there's, I guess there's some little sects that still try to hold on, but the point is
correct. There are some spin-off sects. Yeah.
But I think for a lot of people, modern secular people, Mormonism and weirdly gets lumped in sometimes with like the Mennonites or the cats in Pennsylvania. Why am I suddenly?
Yeah.
The Amish. And I don't think that's true, but what I'm saying is your report from the edge is very interesting because that's really that doesn't sound like that's what's happening in Utah.
No. It's definitely, how do I put it? Like I said, it's like they're just kind of holding the back end of the Overton window, but they move with it. You know what I mean?
I get
it. They're in they're always just in the slowest part of the Overton window, but they move with the Overton window.
So let's go back to your immersion. So you're knocking on doors, you're being rejected.
Yeah.
There's deep discomfort in that, but there's also this profound disillusion with your roommate.
Yep.
Are there moments during this upside down time in your life? And again, upside down doesn't mean bad. It just means you're out of your element. Are there moments when you can see a good reason to stay in the upside down? Or are you just trying to get out of there as a young kid? Do you remember?
No, what you see too, what held me there is that you are seeing people who are in despair and who are suffering, whose lives are being changed by what you're sharing with them.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Right. I mean, people who, like, we had a guy who moved from his family from Guyana, and he had been a steel worker in Guyana, and he moved to Canada because of the political turmoil. He went to Canada as a refugee, and he couldn't get a permit to work there for whatever reason. So he had been in an apartment on welfare for like 3 years. He was going crazy. He was losing his mind because he was used to being physical and working hard.
Right.
And we brought him a daily ritual, and we brought him weekly church, and we brought him a community. And he latched on and brought his family, and like his life was transformed. There was somebody in the ward, is their word for parish, and somebody in the ward who got him a job, and he got to work, and like
what's not to love at that point?
Yeah, you see that and you go, okay, I can do this. Like okay, it's worth it. Like that's why I'm here. I am here to suffer. I am here to lose myself in the work. That was the phrase. I am here to lose myself in the work. So shut up.
Did you question?
Right.
Were you questioning the teachings ever during this deep immersion?
Yeah. Oh, well, because so on my mission, I don't know if it was like this in all missions, but in my mission, you get out there and there's like, it's almost like you're kind of inducted into like a Gnostic kind of like, oh, have you heard about this? Oh, have you heard about this? Oh, I have this. Like at that time, this was like early internet, like kind of pre-internet. And so like people just had photocopies of like books of stuff that was like not widely known in Mormonism, but was still Mormonism, like the esoteric kind of teachings. Mm-hmm. And you start getting introduced to the esoterica of Mormonism and the occultic ties and the Freemasonry ties and, the occult symbolism. And you start getting tied into that. And then some of the theology is wild. And yes, you just go, man, how do you like, that's where, and then they make these, the hard part for me was like they say, this is the literal history of the American people in ancient America. And this is the literal. Like they kept using that word, right? Like one time Joseph Smith walking in the forest with some guys, he sees a skull and he picks it up and he goes, oh, this was, I can't remember the guy's name, Zelph. And he was a Nephite, like from the Book of Mormon. Like this guy fought in the Book of Mormon, right? And you're just like, oh, what? Because they get in some arguments about geography as it's described in the Book of Mormon versus geography as it's explained by Joseph Smith. And
did you
things get squirrely.
Let's do this real quick. I want to ask this question when we come back. I'm going to take a quick break for a quick break for a little announcement, but I want to ask this when we come back. So hold on one second. Quick break. This month and for the next 3 months, I am going to be pestering you. I want you to be a monthly donor. I want you to hit the link that comes with this podcast. You'll find it in the show notes. It takes you directly to a page that allows you to donate a little bit of money each month. A lot of bit of money would be even better. When you do that, you create momentum. It's spiritual momentum found in the form of a click. It is, because what happens is those dollars go to our field workers. So they eat, sleep, and serve people all around the world, including right here in America. Do that and watch their projects grow. And you can talk to these people directly. You can speak to them directly about the projects they're building, but we need you, I need you to support them. I need you to become a monthly donor. We're a teeny little organization that's growing and has grown. So we're not so teeny anymore. And each time we grow, we add beautiful people to this team. And those people need to be supported. Everyone's yelling at me to ask you because I hate to, but I am. Become a monthly donor. Do it now. Look at the show notes. Click, give. We are thankful. So here's my question. When you're hearing the skull story, and by the way, I think all Christians, I was confronted by this when I became Orthodox, and had a lot to do with the miracles and saints. Mm-hmm. You're confronted with this. You're 20 years old or whatever. Are you confiding with other Mormons that like, wait a minute, hold on, this is nutty. I don't really buy this. And then are you still walking off the bus and into someone's apartment and to tell them about it? Like, how's that working within you?
So that's a great question. And I would frame it this way. I took a lot of pride in knowing those things and still feeling like I was integrating it. Like I did have like the Gnostic pride of like, I know these secret teachings and I'm still like a firm believer. Like, that's why I'm here, is because they have those deeper beliefs, right? So like from, like, you know, Joseph Smith, like a lot of Mormons don't know this, Joseph Smith thought that Jesus Christ was married and had children, and that he was a direct descendant of Jesus Christ, right? So and that's what caused the first major schism in Mormonism. After Joseph Smith died, Emma Smith said it should be by blood because Joseph Smith is a direct descendant of Christ.
Oh, that's that fight. That's that debate. Oh,
and yeah, and then Brigham Young was like, no, it's by seniority, and I'm the most senior apostle, so I should be the next prophet, right? So that was but that's, like, most Mormons don't know that, but I knew that, and I still went with the Brigham Young side. But that was what actually tore me apart, was like toward the end, I was either going to go be a fundamentalist Mormon, which was like the polygamy and the old way, like the original, you know, Joseph Smith founding, or I was going to leave it entirely, because I could see that the modern church had completely drifted from what Joseph Smith taught, and they had tried to like, the spirit of ecumenism hit the Mormon church hard in the late 80s, early 90s. They actually reconciled with the Catholic Church, and because they had taught that the Catholic Church was the great and abominable whore of the earth, right?
For sure.
Until, yeah, I mean, they were just like the Baptists, you know, until the late 80s, early 90s, and then all of a sudden they reconciled with the Catholic Church, and the spirit of ecumenism took over. And now they've tried to, like, appeal to the world by being more worldly, you know, with the shopping center and the, you know, the TV commercials and the media and all that stuff.
Right.
So,
it's interesting the way you're using that. This is the spirit of ecumenism.
Yeah, as far as from their frame of mind, like from their frame of view, it's an ecumenism where they're trying to make peace with all of these other Christian groups and saying, oh, well, we're all alike. Let's focus on what we have in common. Let's not focus on the differences. They're not really important. The spirit of ecumenism.
Sure. But
so anyway, for me, the way I read, it was hard, but I felt fine with it until after I got off my mission and I was kind of separated from it for a while. Like, not so intense, I left my mission and I was way into, I'll be a mission, right. I'll be a Mormon for life. And then I kind of ran into the world again. And then, that's when honestly, like, Eastern religion started appealing to me a lot more. Mysticism. Like, I started meditating. I started getting into martial arts. The Matrix came out. That was probably what really, like, the movie The Matrix is what took me out of the church. Yeah, that took me out of Mormonism.
Why?
Because I got involved in martial arts. I started having mystical experiences, and I couldn't. There was no context for that in the Mormon theology. There was no context for the mystical experience.
So the thing, I want to pick that up. I want to pick up that right there. But the thing that I heard, though, is that the immersion shift. So we do this in First Things. Like, we have people going through a process. We name the process. This is going to happen. And then the third month's going to look like this. And then the 6th month. Now, it's not science, but we know. And
you probably shouldn't tell them.
No, by the way, that's a really good point. Sometimes it's not helpful, especially when you're in some of the less, less comfortable locations like West Africa. The process is really tough. And if you know it's coming, it can help you. But for some people, when they know it's coming, it's actually less helpful. But it feels like when you got finished with the part of this that we're talking about on this show, the mission part, the immersion into this crazy difficult job, which is knocking on doors and getting rejected all day long, which is very fascinating. Right. I mean, I still want to hear like what people told you. Maybe you can give
us we can talk about that. Yeah.
It doesn't feel like, well, let me ask you something. Were you moving toward transformation? Was there metanoia in that immersion process called your mission in the Mormon church? Was there something that happened to you? It just feels like you were bolstered in what you already were, perhaps, no?
Well, definitely suffered from the spirit of pride. Like, pride was like the biggest thing. And I took pride in my knowledge. Like I took pride in knowing. I had the scriptures memorized. I had the discussions memorized. I knew all of these esoteric things. I took immense pride in that. And that pride really set me up for the fall later. But so there was a sense of, I did gain a sense of prayer in that I learned to ignore most of the noise in my mind, right? Like those repetitive, like nonsense, and learn to really like settle in. Like if I had a decision to make, I could pray about it and feel like I had some sense of peace about how I was moving forward, right? And what's ironic about that, looking back, it all makes sense. But at that time, it was really hard to explain to someone how I was praying and felt like I should leave the church. And they were just like, what? Well, it's telling you that, right? And I'm just like,
that's wild.
No, I know what's telling me that. And it's the same thing that told me to go. It's telling me to leave. And I couldn't deny that.
What is it? What was it?
I have just always wanted to know the truth. Like I just always wanted that. Like that's what I've always been looking for. Like it was always like I want to know how it is. I don't want to know how it should be. I don't want to know how someone thinks it is. I don't want to know about that person's experience about how they saw it was. I want to know how it is and I want to experience it. And through martial arts, I started getting exposed to participating in a tradition. And I wanted that. And I didn't know that there was a way to do that in the Christian framework. Like I didn't know about orthodoxy. I had no idea it existed. The only apologetics that Mormons have is in response to Catholicism and the claims of Catholicism. They have no way to respond to orthodoxy because most of them don't know it exists. I mean, that may have changed now. That's probably changed now because of the internet. But I'm saying at that time, all the apologetics were toward Catholicism, which lost its own. They also went through the loss of mysticism.
Right.
They killed all of their monasteries.
Yeah. Not unlike Protestant apologetics are always against Catholics for the most part.
Yeah, exactly. So I was looking for a mystical experience and I was willing to go. So when I left the church, I got into Scientology and I got into Buddhism. I got into Taoism. I actually have a Taoist tattoo on my arm. Wu Wei. It means action, non-action. It means doing things without artifice or working with nature, not against it. So I was seeking the mystical experience. I got into meditation and I got into the New Age. I got into the occult.
In some ways, it almost is like you weren't seeking mystical experiences. You were seeking the truth, which led you to something like a mystical experience. Because it feels like your life, as you're describing it, which is really great for this immersion series, it feels like it's a series of immersions, deep, profound, letting go, being upside down, in order for something like the truth to be known. Does that sound accurate?
Yes, to the horrible chagrin of my wife, to be honest with you.
Is that right? So
Lord have mercy. We've been married for 20 years. And this year, this is our 20th anniversary. And she's followed me through all of this chaos, because we mentioned this offline, but I was also involved in the poker industry for like 7 years, surrounded by degenerates, surrounded by gamblers, right? So,
which is that's another part of our conversation.
So it's always, but I've always had the desire to know what's true. Like I've always been that. Like I've always been like, all the conspiracy theories, I've read about them. All of the, Robert Anton Wilson. I read his.
Was that given to you at birth? Was that something like a spirit that you inherited from your family? That it came to you in way, or did you cultivate it? This desire.
Yes, both. My father is insatiably curious as well. He was a well-read man and very wise, and I looked up to him a lot, and learned that, and I was encouraged in my curiosity. And then I got a lot of attention for being smart, which was where the pride stuff came from. And that really fed that, but it was all propositional. Like I didn't, the martial arts was the only real place that I had experienced like getting out of my head. And that's what I really liked that. Like it really brought me a lot of sense of peace because I could learn how to turn off my mind.
Wow.
And relax.
Is that happening to you now in terms of orthodoxy? Are you learning
as far
to
as
turn off your mind? Like,
yeah. So yeah, I really, what I've been really trying to focus on is reading the lives of the saints. Right. So obviously there's this rich history of theology that's just like sitting like this glowing, this glowing shelf of books in my office. Right. Where I'm just like, and my priest is like, he said, for every book of theology you read, you need to read 2 books that are the lives of a saint, right? A modern saint, preferably.
Smart.
And that's really helped ground me in seeing the faith lived rather than building up this infrastructure in my mind of how I'm going to argue with the next person I talk to, right?
What do you call it? That's the temptation of propositionalism or something, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, I am super prone to that, right? That is my biggest probably spiritual downfall is the pride and the seeking to systematize and structure and overanalyze everything. Because I want, like, the world, here's the thing. This is what it is, John. It comes from a deep anxiety of feeling like the world is not predictable and not certain, and that if I systematize it, I can minimize that.
Wow.
Which is pure delusion. It's pure delusion.
Thank you. Wow. Can I speak to that?
But it's hard. Yeah,
so
yeah.
This is you're helping me literally as I hear you. I'm thinking, so for our work, this is one of the hardest things, and I'm going to hit play and record. While we're recording, I'm going to play what you just said. It is what we're trying to do, which is face the delusion that so many of us are brought up on, and that we're sent overseas or to Appalachia or to the quote poor people to fix, which is their inability to play the propositional game. You guys are so dysfunctional because you don't have proper plans, and you don't have the world properly engaged with your propositional mind, so you can order it in a way that you can get quote healthy or rich. And what I'm realizing is our work is actually an attempt to strip those propositions down in ourselves so that we can meet people actually as they live, because nobody lives propositionally. They think that way, but they don't live that way. I can get in a car right now, Jeremy. I really wouldn't get into a car knowing what I know about the atomistic, crazy up and down nature of the world, because I could die. I could literally I would just shut down eventually if I actually lived propositionally. Let's be honest. I think that's what happened with COVID, right? On some level is people were trying to take the data and then make all of these really pronounced rational decisions based on the data. And then all around them, they were actually living a world almost where COVID was in some ways not even in existence. In other words, the proposition was the danger is here. The danger is here. I'm living in it. I'm scared. This is going to be terrible. But actually, you just watch people walk across the street and everything was fine. They weren't living in their actual world. They were living in a propositional world. Does that sound right to you?
Yeah. And that's the cause of anxiety in my mind. That's the cause of anxiety.
It's also the cause. It's the cause of what happens to folks like you when on mission, when no one will listen to you, because the proposition is they should. When our work, when the field worker doesn't produce the proper project, the proposition was you should have a good project. When in reality, no, you shouldn't. You should have a relationship based on love, and that's it. There's really nothing outside of the relationship, because that's where the reality is found. And so I don't know. You got me to think, man. I don't know if I'm thinking properly about this, but
no, I hear you. Well, and I will say this, right? So toward the end of your mission, you learn to shut up about being an American, and you start asking people about their stories, right? Like I heard unbelievable stories of suffering of people who gave up everything to get to Canada just for one last shred of hope, right? Like I'll just tell you a quick little story, like a quick little anecdote that was one of the life-changing things that happened to me. Mm-hmm. And I'd only been on my mission like 6 months, and we went into it was like 5 guys that were living together, and 2 of them were brothers and the other 2 were cousins, right? So they were all related. And they were all our age or right around there, plus or minus 5 years. And they had fled from Iraq and had to go through the mountains into Turkey and get to Turkey and then come to Canada, right? And they didn't have any furniture. They just had rugs, which was kind of common. That was like for the lower class, for the lower income people that we were meeting with that had just gotten there, they had nothing. Yeah. So we were just sitting on rugs on a hardwood floor. And that's another nice thing about Canada is everyone takes their shoes off when you go into someone's house. So I had taken my shoes off and I had a hole in my sock on the bottom, And we were talking to them and they were telling us their story and we were telling them a little bit about who we were. And the guy saw the hole in my sock. He's like, hold on. He goes to his room and he comes out and he hands me a pair of socks, And I was like, please, I don't need socks. I've got 30 pair back in my house. They're all brand new. Please. And he said, you can't leave my house. I can't let you leave my house with those socks. And so I took the socks, right? And then I went home and I got all the socks I had and I put them in a bag and I got some other clothes that I didn't need. And I put them in a bag and I just took them and I knocked on the door and then we ran, right?
I love it. I get it. 100%.
And those are the things that kept me on my mission because I learned hospitality. And that is, okay, I want to bring this up with you. You're a person, I think, if I were going to say the biggest difference between New World and Old World the biggest difference is understanding the roles that both parties play in hospitality, right? Yeah. There is a ritual there. Like we would knock on the door of Muslims and they would go, oh, your teacher's from God. Please come in. Please. Come. Sit down. A whole family. Everybody, come. Teachers of God are here. Everybody sits down. Silent. Everybody's looking up, paying attention, right? Wife instantly hops up, goes in the kitchen. You can hear her tea boiling, all the stuff. You're talking. Out comes the tray, silver tray, covered, beautifully arrayed fruit, vegetables, crackers, cheese, cookies, tea, beautiful, amazing tea. My companion should have a really hard time drinking it because Mormons are not supposed to drink tea. I'm like, you gotta, dude, this is,
you better drink that tea, bro.
You have to drink this tea.
No, you don't.
Don't. They don't. You don't understand. You can't do that. Yeah, no. So that was a big. That right there is a big tension with Mormon missionary work, right? Like Mormons do not understand hospitality. They do in a way, but it's a very American hospitality, right? So anyway, I think you doing I haven't heard you really talk about hospitality specifically. I heard Richard good because you and Richard Rowland talked about it some where he was talking about like his Chinese relatives and say hello to the grandparents first and then the parents and then and you have to, when you call them, you need something, you have to go through the news and everything like that. Like the role of both parties in hospitality, you have to be a good host, you make them comfortable, and they have to be a good guest by accepting your offers, right? And just like that is a beautiful dance that is all but dead in America. It's almost gone. And even my grandparents had that.
Let's riff on this for a minute. So here's a couple ideas. So first things, man, you're right in the, as they say in jazz, you're right in the pocket, man. So we have opened up a restaurant. The reason that it is manifest as a restaurant, the reason why it has flash as a restaurant is because it's our offices. And why is it our offices? Because what we realized, and what I realized living in the Georgian Republic, I could tell a story, and I too would cry right now. It's very similar, and it has to do with shoes and socks. We took food to widows, and one of these widows, it was the same story you just told. And I was overwhelmed because they threw us the supra, and the supra is this dinner sometimes called a kepi. In other words, the manifestation of our work is a restaurant, because a restaurant properly done is hospitality writ large.
Yes.
And what you realize is the physics, bro. The physics in the human relationship is built upon the notion of hospitality. Like all of our physics is all of the physics of our existence. In other words, when I say physics, what I'm trying to say is it's the rules that govern our existence. Me and you, me and this guy on the street, whatever. It's all bound in the notion of hospitality. And what is hospitality? Well, of course, it comes from the old, to be a hospital is a place of health. Now, if you think about it, as my wife always tells me, she's a palliative, she's a nurse practitioner in palliative care. She became a nurse practitioner so she could get healthy, which speaks to the dual nature, the insistence on a duality that's essential in any. In other words, you have to be able to receive in order to properly gain health in the hospitality relationship. And I saw this when I tried to give a local tamada, that's the head of the table at a Georgian dinner. I tried to pay him, like give him a big wad of money at the end of one of these dinners. Jeremy, he cursed. He said, no, don't, I will. He was like, he used the F word. I will effing kill you. Take that out of my hand. Because he was like holding my hand. Because I wasn't allowing him to be what he needed to be, which was to gain health through offering. And I was short-circuiting this. And we do it all the time, and it's out of pride. And here's what I mean. Because we imagine they need something we have. No, we need something they have, which is the opportunity to listen and serve. And so I'm really in line with, that's a podcast I got coming out. What is hospitality, old and new? It's such a rich topic. It's such a rich
topic. It's well, and this ties into the new convert experience in orthodoxy too, right? So like Americans coming in, this is part of the problem. This is part of the tension that I feel when you come into orthodoxy as an American, and especially, like my godfather is Romanian, right? And he kind of started keying me in on this. And he's just like, look, he's like, you're coming in, you're a guest in someone's home. Okay. You need to think about that. He's like, we've been here for 2,000 years, and we're happy to have you. You're welcome to be here. But there are certain ways that this household runs. There are certain things that happen. There are certain things that must happen, and and you don't know any of it. And it will be a very long time before you know the smallest things. So shut up and come be a part of it, participate, bring food to the potluck, come to services, come clean the church, come to the liturgy on your name day, and shut up.
Yeah.
And it is the hospitality of remembering that you are a new guest in an old home.
Yeah.
It's a tradition and a culture that needs to be respected. And I think that mindset gets completely lost on the modern American mind, right? Like they just go, oh, I know things about the Bible, and let's talk about it. They're just like,
or no. Worse. Yeah, no, but you're describing someone, a zealot, but or worse, just Joe Blow, secular person who's just decided through 3 or 4 experiences within the last week how to run his house for a week. Like everything's so fleeting. Like, but wait, wouldn't you want to draw on the tradition of your father? But why would I do that? Well, this gets to a whole nother conversation about immersionship and what it means to be to immerse in America, I think, is to acquire the propositional mind. And that's pretty freaky if you think about it. In other words, it could be that our country has spent 250 years developing and perfecting the propositional mind, which is I want it, I imagine it, I achieve it. Think about all that. That all took place in my mind without a single relationship.
Yep.
That's pretty wild. We both have stories.
That's a really good point
that speak to this.
Yeah.
That's why I wanted
that's
you
a
on
very
here.
good. That's a very interesting point. Yeah, no, I hadn't thought of it in those terms, but you're exactly right. And trying to reintroduce that to people, right? They just look at you like you're crazy, and you look at them like they're stupid,
right?
And that's the they just go, why are you so wound up about this stuff, right? Like,
well, because
calm down and have some tea, and you go, no, you don't understand. Like, this stuff's important. This is urgent. We've got to get seed in the burlap sacks before the rain comes.
That's right. That's right. Everybody, and I, by the way, I learned those lessons in Africa, where people were like, "This dude is hyped."
Yeah, me too. Yeah. Well, I'm always drawn back to that scripture of, God cares, like the sparrows, they sing, they don't worry about where their food's coming from, right? And how much more valuable are you to God than a sparrow, right? And you have to, that's what I'm working through right now. That's my big kind of spiritual struggle right now, to
let me ask you a question.
Let go of those like trappings, of all the stuff and all of the plans and all that. Just let it go.
It's proper. It's the proper spiritual path. I don't think it's a debate. I think anybody who's searching for something like a spiritual answer they're going to have to let go of their propositions and also their control over their life. That's how it works. Yeah. That's what God is on some level. Let go. Yeah. But let's just talk person to person, man to man for 1 second. Can you do it though? Like, how far down the rabbit hole can you go before you realize, wait, am I going to pay rent? Like, when do the thoughts creep back in? For me, it's every day. It's almost every day that I start to question my true intentions within the Christian, church, like the orthodoxy. Almost every day I'm like, I'm not really, I'm worrying about more than 6 months out. I'm going to worry about the next 6 years. And I'm going to plan it all, and I'm going to get it done. That's me on any given day. And then there's a quiet prayer moment where I'm like, okay, that's got to stop. But it's hard.
Oh yeah. I agree with, I work in a job where we try to quantify everything, right? Like, that's my job. My job is to quantify productivity, right? So, by the way, that's my job.
I got problems with that, but I got it. You got to do it.
I know. Oh, me too. Trust me. I do too. Like, the most important things cannot show up on a spreadsheet. The most important things about running a business do not show up on a spreadsheet. My job is to make spreadsheets, right? So yeah, I'm working through this, but I'm saying, like, the beautiful thing about orthodoxy is that it presents you with these paradoxes. They're like the Christian version of koans almost, where it's a paradox that you're presented with that you got to spend some time with.
Yeah.
And you have to hold both sides of it as true, right? And you just have to hold it, even their intention, right? And you just have to sit with that.
I love that. Love that.
And that tension is what holds you there.
Yeah.
It's what holds your attention. It's what allows you to draw into attention. I'm grateful for the background I had in meditation, because it gave me a tool set to enter into prayer properly in Christianity, right? Like I kind of feel like I had a head start where I already knew how to do the quiet the mind and the thoughts and get down. But there's these paradoxes like you're talking about. Don't worry about, where your next meal's coming from, but your wife is going to ask you.
Yes.
Right? Your daughter's like, Dad, what are we eating? And you go, 100%. Right? Like, there is a world, like, we are in the world, we are embodied.
Yes.
And we don't have to worry about it. Like, God will provide for it, but we can't ignore, especially as a family, we've chosen the world, we've chosen the marriage path, right?
Yeah.
We didn't choose the monastic path. And the marriage path is a different struggle. And I don't think we need to become monks. Like, just living a marriage properly is a monastic life.
Well,
right?
when we conceived
that struggle.
when we conceived of this Immersion series, guys like you popped up, and this is wonderful. But we thought we could just interview anyone who's ever been married because they're upside down. They dove in and they got all sideways, and it's supposed to be that way. I think,
right. It's dealing, so this ties into something that this is a theme that's playing out recently in my life, and it has to do with fantasy selves and fantasy. Like I realized I was really prone to being with someone, and I was like amped up and excited, like I'm an excitable person, and I would like start building a caricature of this person in my mind. Mm-hmm. All of my fantasy things that I wanted someone to be like. And then I was convinced that this person was like that. And I was looking for all the evidence that they were and ignoring all of the evidence that they weren't. And then you get in a relationship with them and you get married to them. And then you find out that it was just in your head. Right. And then, so what I'm realizing now is that I've done the same to myself. Like I'm the biggest obstacle in my spiritual journey. Like I have all of these fantasy selves that I've built up, and like 3/4 of my possessions belong to those fantasy selves, right? So now I have to go through and crucify each one of them, and then just get rid of the stuff that belonged to that one, and that one, and that one, and you're whittling down to the essence. And I wasn't aware of any of that before orthodoxy, right? That is the window. That's the light that starts coming into the house when you start opening the curtains and you go, oh, this is dirty.
So you're describing, so the upside down, the thing for this show we're calling the upside down, the immersion ship of the Mormon mission moment in your life really is different than the upside down of this process of going through and becoming Orthodox and crucifying. Yeah. What makes it different? And maybe that's where we'll put a little bit of an end to it. What
that's nice.
What's the difference? Because this isn't to go, hard on Mormonism. That's not really what this podcast is about.
No. I'm grateful for what I learned there. Exactly. I'm very grateful for the discipline and dude, you're going out 12 hours a day on your own. No one's making you.
Yeah, I think
for 2 years.
That's
7 days a week.
That's a deep upside down, man. That's hard to
do. It is. It's extremely difficult. And so there is something to be said for that. But the difference is, I don't think the Mormons have as clear of a understanding, or understanding is such a dumb word because theirs is largely just propositional. And I'm saying it's the difference in understanding pride and how it manifests. And it's the difference in having a spiritual father who has been through, we had a mission president. We had an elderly gentleman who had been a missionary when he was a young man, was very successful. He was the Utah State Attorney General. And then he came out and he was there for 3 years. So he was the one who was kind of our spiritual support, our spiritual father. So we had that, but you're stripped of all support structure. Like we had an ancillary relationship with the church because we're transients basically. We're moving churches every 4 to 6 months. And so you're really kind of tied to your companion, the mission president, and God, right? And to start building that relationship with God in the way that you understand it in that point. But I think the difference is that Mormonism is still kind of siloed, and they don't have a good mechanism or good pattern or good ritual for dealing with a spiritual struggle. Really the answer is read your scriptures more and pray more and be more obedient, because everything that's happening to you is because you're falling down in one of those areas. It's very like legalistic and accusatory almost. And that's how I took it. And I'm not saying that's how they meant it. I'm just saying that was the effect it had on me. Yeah. And their understanding of the atonement is what affects this, right? So their understanding of the atonement is very legalistic. They definitely believe in a substitutionary atonement model. Mm-hmm. And that is what sets you up for that pride, despair cycle I went through constantly. Despair, anxiety, pride. elation, all that. Like, it's just like, it's a very destructive spiritual cycle. It's probably the worst thing that you can do to yourself spiritually, or one of them. It was just awful.
Yeah.
And that's what I got ingrained in, and that's what I thought was spirituality.
Yeah.
And in orthodoxy, your priest goes, yeah, of course you're going to be confessing the same things every time. Why would? Sure. You're not going to, you think you're going to overcome it? Like, you're weak. You're nothing. You're human. Of course you are, right? That's what Thomas for, but you're here. Yeah, it is. It's, you have to participate, and the participation will heal you.
That's right.
But it will also reveal.
That's right.
Right? It reveals the weakness and heals it in parallel. Not at the same time, parallel, right?
Again, everything is both and, in the same way. God became man so that man could become God. Everything is intertwined. That's why the new gender movement, they're groping towards something real, which is, of course, men and women participate one another in their natures. I don't have an utterly separate nature from, I understand this. Any ancient faith, any ancient wisdom understands that. They understand that. But the idea that you can't set a binary, that you can't set two poles, you do both. Both exist at the same time. And so, of course, there's a man and a woman. And of course, men and women have that in the Venn diagram, they cross over, they share natures. We get that.
Right.
That's not hard to understand for the ancient East, even for Muslims. It's not hard to understand that. Unfortunately, we've fallen into this trap that things can't, that the postmoderns want it to be, there is no poles. And the enlightened philosophers can't stand the contradictions. So,
correct. They cannot stand paradox.
Yeah, they,
like their whole, that's the Enlightenment project, right? Is to eliminate paradox.
That's right.
Yeah. Anything that's paradoxical is nonsensical. Right. So let's throw it out.
Right.
It's like, man, you lose a lot.
And at the risk of sounding like just some orthodox, Yahoo apologetic dude, there's a way down the middle. It's just you're not going to walk it. Jeremy, you and I aren't going to make it, but
no.
Christ he's the middle way, borrowing from Buddhism.
Yeah.
It's obvious. What happened to me with orthodoxy is history became obvious. As a historian, orthodoxy allowed me to see the obvious that I couldn't see before. I was still on this linear concept, the idea of, a linear world that ends in perfection. And you realize this
progress and all that.
Yeah. It's impossible. But bro, this is good.
I agree with you.
I just want to say, because we've been going, I think we could keep going, but
I know, I'm sorry, I'm taking a lot of your time.
I think you helped us though on our first Immersionship sub-series, which is to say something like, you went through this process and you don't deny that you don't deny it as a positive thing in your life. The missionary work with
no, it was immensely beneficial. I mean, obviously I struggled, but that's not a problem. Like it did rip me out of being a young man into being, it ripped me out of being a boy into being a man, or a young man anyway. Right. And it gave me a framework for moving forward. Now I've, struggled a lot after that and made a ton of mistakes and fell into worldliness and despair and pride and, degeneracy and gambling and all that. Right. Like I fell into all of that, but I always had that to fall back to of the point is, and I think what you're trying to achieve with First Things is that you're trying to put people in a place where they're stripped of all of the structure that they had that supported their worldview, and they're put into a different worldview. And then like if I were going to give advice to someone who was doing that, I would just say, just listen more, just ask them, get curious about their culture, and they're going to first ignore you, and first they're going to be like, oh, I don't know about that, no. But if you show that if you just show up every day willing and quiet, eventually they're going to take you aside and be like, okay, let me show you this.
Yeah.
You know,
we have a problem in the West that just work and product have been aligned in such a way where good work only happens when there's a product, and the product should look something like the plan that you went into the work with. And that's fine. I don't mind this. I'm like air conditioning, bro. I'm happy with it.
Right. Yeah, I understand it.
That's
right. We're on the internet right now. So
it's all fine and dandy. That's fine and dandy. But we have someone coming on in a couple of weeks. Esther Lighthouse Meeks. She's a philosopher, and she talks about knowing as work. So when I turned on this computer and started talking to you, I did not know you the way I know you now. I can retire this evening knowing I worked, because now I know about you. And that is in and of itself the product. It's this, you don't have to produce all the time to imagine yourself working. That is a very old world idea.
Yeah. Well, and some of the results that come from your work, you will not live to see. Right. Okay. So like when I was, I have a pioneer heritage. My relatives were Mormon pioneers. They converted in England and came all the way here and walked from Illinois to Utah. Okay. There's a couple of things that are really cool about that. One is, on their way, the people who came first, the pioneers who came first, were planting gardens all along the way. And they were there was a guy who built an odometer for his wagon. It would count how many times the wheel went around, and it was accurate within like 3 miles over 1,200 miles, right? Wow. Phenomenal. Yeah, he hand built the odometer for it. So he was tracking how long it's going to be and keeping a journal. They all kept journals of what is this trip like, and they were sharing it. They were sending them back, with messengers that would go back to the earlier parties to tell them. And then they were planting gardens along the way. So they left in March. Well, they're not going to be eating, right? But they were planting gardens for the people who come. I still eat asparagus, for the people who are coming after them. Yeah, right? It's gorgeous. I still eat asparagus that was planted on the ditch banks, the irrigation ditch banks, to hold the soil together. They planted asparagus. I still eat that, right? You go downtown, there's a couple of towns here. The main street is lined by these huge 100-year-old maple trees. It's beautiful. Well, the people who founded the city, they planted them.
And they never saw them.
But they don't get to enjoy a beautiful Sunday afternoon drive in August down Main Street to get an ice cream cone, right? That legacy is something that I'm trying to bring back, of like, don't worry about like today or how many views did I get or my followers, all that nonsense, right? Like,
create a library, bro. Just create a library. Let people read them in 50 years, 60 years, 100 years.
Yeah, something where you can contribute something that lives past you, or something that somebody else wants to take up when you die, or somebody else who at least gets to enjoy when you're not here. They're participating in your identity. That's how you stay alive. Yeah. Right? You stay alive in other people's memory. Anyway.
Well, let's keep talking, man. We'll have you back.
I would love it. I would love it.
It is really nice. It was. I got emotional at one point. I thank you for that. I like that. Emotional here meaning I just was about to cry. That's all that means.
That sock story, man. I mean, that's just, you can't live through that without and I mean, it's been 25 years, and I can't think of cry again.
Yeah. All right, guys. Thank you. Thank you to Jeremy Firth. Thank you, brother. This has been really good, and
it's been a pleasure.
Whoa, get the flow, Jeremy Firth. That was good. I loved that conversation. That's your immersion pod for today. We'll get back to the regular pods next week when we do heavy things lightly, but I love that. Man, there was a lot of information there about what it means to grow and how one grows, and all the blessings and all the difficulties involved. Wow. So That's this podcast. That's WAWTAR. It's brought to you by Andrew Schwark and Daniel Paternos of First Things Foundation. We are the nonprofit that sends people into the world, 4 continents currently, to do this thing called small project development using this model of deep immersionship, where we learn local languages, not colonial languages. Well, we learn those too, but local languages, where we try to create capacity and momentum for local change makers, folks we call impresarios. That's all we do. Create relationships, build projects. Share WAWTAR with friends. Hit us up. Solid review on iTunes. Do all those things. And most of all, really consider that monthly donation by going right now into the link on this very show and clicking. And it'll take you right to where you got to go to be our monthly donor. We need you. It's big time. Nakvam dis, hasta luego, come bufo, au revoir. Peace out.